Here's a quick lesson video on the half-whole diminished scale. This is a really great scale for getting some interesting tensions on dominant seventh chords. So I'll use D7 for all the examples in this video. You can use the scale over functioning dominant seventh chords. So what I mean by that is a dominant seventh chord that resolves down a fifth or up a fourth. So D7 to G major 7 or D7 to G minor. The half-whole diminished scale is a really great choice for either of those contexts. So the scale is going to be 8 notes. We have D, E flat, F, F sharp, A flat, A, B, and C. So an 8-note scale, you want to spend some time just trying to visualize the scale all over the neck, right? So in different scale positions that you use, different fingerings, really get used to the sound of it, get the sound of it in your ears. And then after that, just try noodling in the scale, right? I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I think that it's a really great way of developing vocabulary naturally, and more importantly, vocabulary that feels natural to you. One thing I think that we can jump into a little bit too quickly is, kind of moving theory first into whatever the concept is. So like taking an arpeggio or a melodic shape or something like that and really trying to mechanically move that through the scale and get a lot of mileage out of it. But I think if you just noodle within the scale and try finding things that feel natural to your fingers, that sound good to your ears, you'll end up with vocabulary that you like very quickly. So I would practice doing that, for maybe like an hour at a time, again, just over a vamp or over a drone or something like that, and try to kind of work out good habits within the scale, basically. So after that, I would recommend breaking down some of those shapes that you find that you like. So I'll use D7 as an example again. I'll just kind of noodle within the scale and I'll isolate a couple shapes that I play that I like the sound of. Right, so one thing that I did a lot in that example is this sort of melodic shape. So, and also, so the first one was A flat, E flat, and A flat up an octave, and the second one was A flat, D, and A flat up the octave. So the cool thing, when you find little shapes like that within the scale, you can move them around in minor thirds. So if I take A flat, E flat, A flat, I can move that up to B, F sharp B, or D, A, D, or F, C, F. And then, because I found that through improvisation, a lot of it is going to come into my playing naturally, but at this moment I can kind of take that and approach it more mechanically. So I can say, okay, I like this shape. Let me, start a line with it. Then go into improvisation. Let me start with improvisation and then try to play the little shape, so maybe I'm playing through the scale, right, and then I land on that B, F sharp B, for example. So that's kind of, reverse engineering it. You find it through improvisation first and just kind of noodle around it, and then you try to make it a really concrete thing that you can rely on when you're in the moment improvising. Another thing that I did a lot in that example, little variations on this shape. So this is A, F sharp, A flat, F, C, and A down the octave. Sometimes I'll just do, so that's A, F, A flat, F, C, and A down the octave. But again, I can move that around in minor thirds. There's that first shape. All right, so again, starting with improvisation, finding things that you like the sound of, then really try to make them a habit, basically. Another approach for getting the diminished scale into your playing is to find examples of it in recorded music and then analyze those licks, the lines that you find. So I'll use this line, this Sonny Rollins phrase. I forget which recording it's from, but so this is A minor, D7, flat 9 or D7 altered into G major 7, so a 2-5 line. And I'll kind of just analyze all of the 2-5 material in the context of the 5 chord, which I think is, easier for playing over 2-5-1. So if we take a look at what the notes are in this, we have C, D, E flat, so just going up the scale, up to C, up the octave, and then I have leap down to D sharp, B, F sharp, back to that E flat, and then a chromatic enclosure to D, C, and then B is my resolution. So that's the third of the 1 major 7 chord. One more time. So there's a lot of things to learn from this phrase that I can take into my own playing pretty quickly. The first is this ascending scalar figure. So very specific thing happening here. He's starting the phrase with this whole step. Right, so C to D. Starting a phrase with a whole step in the half whole diminished scale, or even the whole half, which is closely related topic, but it just sounds much smoother in bebop and like in straight ahead jazz vocabulary than starting with the half step. I think the half step sounds kind of like square, sort of boxy. So if I do rather than, right, very subtle difference, but I think it's just easier to control the accents when you have that whole step in the scale to start. The half step rub happening on strong beats, again, just sounds kind of awkward, I think. So starting the scale with that whole step, you could do the opposite descending, right? So starting with the whole step descending, so it's D to C. And that could be basically like a little concept that you then try to get into your playing. Like if you're practicing the diminished scale, it's like, okay, I'm going to start with a whole step in the scale, and I'm going to try to resolve it into the 1 chord. So maybe something like, right? So I started with that D to C, and then the rest of it I was kind of just like hanging on by the edge of my seat, trying to find a way to resolve it, So that's one concept that you can get from the line, is starting scalar phrases, linear stuff, with a whole step. Sounds smooth, sounds connected, easy to control the accents on. The next part of the phrase, right, this little leap, I think is really interesting, this leap of a 6th down. You could take that as kind of a melodic shape and move it through the scale, even just those 2 notes. Right, so if I go, or finding different resolution, or, right, just improvising variations on that little 2-note motif. And the last part of the phrase that I'll draw attention to is this triad, right? This B, F sharp, D sharp is a B major triad in first inversion, right? So, you can take that concept, move it through the scale in minor thirds, play around with those as melodic shapes, play around the other inversions as well. So, maybe starting from like D in second inversion, so A, D, F sharp, and then moving that to F, A flat, and B. There's a lot of different ways to develop vocabulary within the scale, and everybody I think has one thing that's like kind of personal to them. So this step I think is most useful when you already have the sound of the diminished scale in your ears. So starting with that previous step that I mentioned of just really noodling around in the scale, and then that'll make it a lot easier to recognize it when you hear it in recordings. And I can also point you to a couple different people that I think use the scale quite a bit in like various eras of their playing, like Dizzy Gillespie. Some points of Bud Powell's playing, you hear some diminished scale stuff. John Coltrane as well, especially a lot of pattern-based stuff If you listen to his solo on Moment's Notice, there's, I think maybe in like the third chorus or something, he plays this like really crazy pattern that's some variation on this. Right, so I can't really do it too fast, but it's just whole steps separated by fourths within the scale. Right, so G to F, and this is in the B flat half whole diminished scale, and then B flat to A flat. So you start on G, E, D flat, and then you can just move it through all those inversions and minor thirds. But yeah, just, you know, noodling around in the scale allows you to recognize the sound of it in different recordings. Then you can more freely do that practice that I did with the Sonny Rollins phrase, where you break it into different pieces and try to then put those pieces into your playing. I've mentioned a lot before, but I think that anytime you hear like a long phrase, it's just kind of the sum of all these smaller parts that are being combined together. There are very few prominent improvisers out there that I think use you know, really long licks that they play the same way every time. But yeah, that's just a quick little lesson on the diminished scale. Happy holidays and happy practicing.